If, like me, you're interested in the history of moving bodies, then visual imagery is really important, and it's a really great way of finding out a bit more about their position in society, but also about their acts themselves. So the person that I am really interested in is Jules Leotard, who was the first man to perform the flying trapeze. He did that in 1859 in France, but then had his first performances in London in 1861. So this material here is from around about that period. This image, it's the front of some music. And the lovely thing about this is we've got this lovely image of Leotard on it. We can see at the top here that it's dedicated by permission to Monsieur Jules Leotard. There is no actual evidence, in fact, that this music was performed to his act as musical accompaniment, but it shows how someone was inspired by his performance to write music. There are also other instances of how he inspired work as well. So here we have the Art of Balancing lecture by Professor J.H. Pepper. This was a bit like an illustrated performance lecture. So we have here that Professor Pepper was explaining the principles on which Blondin and Leotard perform their wonderful feats. This lecture will be illustrated with curious mechanical figures, one of which propels itself in water. Also with dissolving diagrams, pictures and photographs by Messrs. Negretti and Zambra. Messrs. Frost of London Street, Fenchurch Street have kindly sent a portion of the same rope which is used by Monsieur Blondin at the Crystal Palace. So this shows how Leotard, it was a craze in wider society that also in France included things like canes, pins and brooches. What these images here show is Leotard in costume. And the reason we do call the Leotard is because of Jules Leotard. It was noted in the press that his costume was different to the standard acrobat. And we can see here on these images that the exposure of the costume was very, very important. Particularly in this image, you can see how the costume cuts over the pectoral muscle and how it actually cuts across the thigh muscle. The black and white set off each other in a contrasting way. And for that reason, Leotard also became tied up with ideas about athleticism, such as muscular Christianity, which was all about the healthy body and the healthy male mind. What we've got here is another wonderful image. This is one which I have a huge amount of affection for because it was how I made sense of a few details of Leotard's act, which I'd read about in press coverage. What I hadn't understood from that press coverage is how Leotard was performing over the heads of audiences. And we can see that it's because a platform was built through the centre of the audience and that actually a huge number of the audience had to be moved onto the stage. You can also see that this is deemed to be an incredibly popular act because of the number, the sheer congregation of people and the fact that the audience had both men and women in it. What these images show us is how Leotard came to stand in for different ideas in society, how he came to epitomise a certain type of masculinity, and also how his popularity led him to be co-opted by manufacturers, musicians and lecturers to sell their flying man products.